Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneider. Joined as always my co-host Nick Filato. It's almost time, baby. Training camp on the way. And I'm excited to see it because we have the defense to talk about today. We're previewing what we want to see from the defense, our biggest question marks. And I'll say this, as we go into camp, Nick, the expectation on both of our ends, and you know this if you listen to our offensive preview podcast before this, is that the defense is going to have the upper hand for at least the start of training camp. And in my mind, most likely all of camp, with the exception of the practices where both Dable and Bowen agree to tilt it in the favor of the offense by doing different things and not allowing things from the defense. Because let's just be honest, there's a massive talent difference, I think, at least on the defense versus the offense. The last year proved it. The defense was so much better than the offense. We've added Abdul Carter to it. And then also, like you mentioned last podcast, these quarterbacks, it's going to take them some time to get this offense out. You know, Daniel Jones last year was going into year 3 of this offense. That helped a lot in training camp. And we saw it. Jones had his best training camp ever. I think last year, was that his best? He was pretty decent in training camp. And then obviously it didn't carry over. But that type of advantage plays out in the early parts of camp. A guy like Russ, a guy like Dart, they don't have that experience in the offense. It could be ugly at first. We could be seeing bad communication issues, incomplete passes, interceptions, balls bad at the line of scrimmage, late plays where people are saying, and who are watching practice, there would have been a sack, but they didn't, there's no sacks in camp. So I'm excited to see it from that standpoint of just, can the defense be that dominant? Because that'll make us think, Nick, are we going to be that dominant of a defense when the real regular season hits?
I could see a lot of, that would have been a sack. I could see a lot of that going. There's going to be a lot of discussion around that with Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, Chauncey Golston, and obviously, which leads into my first question about the Giants training camp, Abdul Carter.
Right.
What is his usage? That's what I want to know. That's what I want to see. We're going to be able to get some information from Shane Bowen by just seeing how he aligns Abdul Carter. Does he use Abdul Carter, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Brian Burns in the same defensive packages? And if so, how is he aligning them? Is Abdul Carter over the A-gap? Is he playing linebacker? Is he the quarterback spy in third and long situations? Is he out wide with the wide 9 with Brian Burns, with Dexter Lawrence running and Kayvon Thibodeau next to him? There's so many different formations that you can utilize with this much defensive talent. And I am so curious to see, and we'll talk about, the back end, but I'm so curious to see what Shane Bowen does from a personnel standpoint and from an alignment standpoint with his current personnel.
And we're going to get, not to fast forward too much, but we're going to get the most fun example of that when we get those Giants-Jets joint practices at some point in camp, because that's when you could just let it really rip and fly. You don't have to worry about kind of like embarrassing your offense, because you can afford them. And Justin Fields is going to really, really struggle to process those guys, I think, in the pass rushes that we can kind of put out there. But with that said, I think the key thing here is, I was thinking about this, Nick, because we watched so much Abdul Carter tape, and then we watched the rest of this edge class. I think you would agree with me when you say there was a massive stark difference in contrast to watching Abdul Carter versus the rest of this pass rushing class. To me, it was like one guy stood out completely above the others. There were a couple guys that were like, can somewhat bend the edge and get around and up the arm.
Ezeraku.
Ezeraku. There were guys who can sort of do it, but not at the level and not the movement skills that Carter had, and not the diversity, the way that Penn State
and
used
Carter, he played edge one season. He was a linebacker for the Nittany Lions.
That's a good point too, just to think about the upside. So I think when you're talking about a player like him, he's not someone who, like Ezeraku, for example, or some of these other guys, might play some kind of role in year one. And in camp, it's like he's starting out, he's getting some reps with the ones and then some twos, a lot of twos. This is like a guy that you just put in with the ones right away, and he may very well be, I'm not going to say he is, but he may be one of your best players on your entire team, let alone your defense, in year one. That's not a guarantee. He may not be, but there's obviously and clearly that upside for him to be. So I think in camp, I'd love to see them just have him hit the ground running, have every rep for Carter be a first team rep. Few reps with the twos, I guess, just fine, whatever. But like, get him with those ones. Let's see how it works. Let's see how these guys work together.
Absolutely. And also Abdul Carter, how is he against the run? Now, look, it's not, full on tackling and just hitting and all that kind of stuff, and you're going to nail the court. It's not like that. But you could still see, can this guy hold up against Andrew Thomas on the edge? Can he set the edge? Can he lock out? Can he get his eyes inside or outside, or do whatever he has to do to execute his gap responsibilities? I think that's a big part of Abdul Carter's success and his usage this season, is how he holds up as a run defender, because that may dictate how many reps he earns and what kind of creative formations Shane Bowen can use on more earlier downs if he can actually solidify his run defense, which I would say is a little bit of a question.
Yeah, I would agree with that. His run defense in the way that we're looking for him to be a run defender as far as setting the edge, and he can still be he's still a plus.
He's
as a run
dynamic.
defender because exactly so athletic. He's going to make plays in the backfield for TFLs. That's the cool part. But as far as just doing your job as a run defender, that's something we haven't really gotten great from our edge group, in my mind, at least, with the exception of Jihad. Like, it's kind of been like, with Thibodeau.
Like Kayvon, I think would be like average at it, maybe.
Like with Ojulari.
Yeah.
And so we that's the next level. Where's Carter going to be when it comes to that? Because so much of our run defense depends on just doing your job. And I think that's something that Nacho talked about. I listened to his interview with Schmelk. He was like, they're like, what happened in the run defense? In Nacho's opinion, a lot of it was just people not doing their jobs, whatever that means. And I hear that a lot from these people. And I think that's just essentially, like you talked about earlier, like, you're responsible for this guy. Just like simply do your job and be where you're supposed to be on any given run play. And once you're there, be able to hold up. And that's something Ojulari wasn't able to do. And at times Thibodeau's been okay at. So we'll see what happens there. But I'm really excited, just as we keep it on just like the whole defensive front, to see Darius Alexander in camp, man, because we didn't get to see him in OTAs. We didn't get to hear anything from him in the spring. But what we've heard and he was injured or something. Something weird was happening there. And so I was like, crap, this is going to be a situation, Nick, where it's like week or two into camp, we're still seeing him on the bike. And it's like, oh God, when's this guy ever going to get out there? And if he doesn't get out there soon, he'll never get out there in regular season. And it's year one is a wash. But he's clearly healthy because he's been training with Dexter Lawrence in the time since. And I'm hopeful we're going to get to see him early in camp, maybe even day one. I haven't heard anything that suggests otherwise. And that to me is really exciting because you can look across this D line and maybe Alexander isn't ready for a big role yet. Who knows? But if I look across that D line, dude, there's no one with anywhere near the upside besides Dexter Lawrence, obviously, behind Dexter Lawrence as Darius Alexander. And they've talked up, like Nacho's talked up, and this is a player that we haven't discussed a lot, Roy Robertson Harris, as a player with Schmelk, as a player who he believes will play a big and maybe that's what ends up happening. I'm hopeful he can play a big role, but no one plays the role that Alexander could potentially play this year.
I agree. Absolutely. He's the most upside, especially as a pass rusher. And if he can add more as a run defender, that's great. I think we're going to see a platoon rotation, and that's something to pay attention to during training camp. We paid attention to it last training camp, right? There were certain defensive linemen on the Giants who we were like, yeah, he might make the final roster. And they couldn't escape the third team. They were just on the third team the entire time, which is like a death sentence in this industry. So I'm looking at who is earning first team reps, who's earning second team reps. I look at these two these two new free agents the Giants signed who are over 30 years old, Roy Robertson Harris and Jeremiah Ledbetter, because those guys are going to be competing for a role along with Raheem Nunez-Roches, who I'm pretty sure the Giants can get out of Raheem Nunez-Roches' contract this season if they're comfortable enough with the depth that they have. And that's interesting too, because I think they can save a little bit of money. I had it before and I'll pull it up in a little bit if they want to part ways with Nacho. But Nacho led the entire defensive line group in snaps last year. He had like 600 snaps last year, which is more than anybody else because Dexter Lawrence was injured. So can you get enough out of Jordan Riley and DJ Davidson and Elijah Chapman? Are you comfortable enough with Darius Alexander to part ways with Raheem Nunez-Roches to give you a little bit more cap space, because the Giants are pretty tight right now up against the cap. I think they have like $3 million according to like over the cap. And Jeremiah Ledbetter and Roy Robertson Harris should have a role. It's just both of them are a little long in the tooth at this point. They're on the wrong side of 30. And Roy Robertson Harris last year, he was ineffective for two teams, basically. He was on Jacksonville and he went to Seattle and he didn't do all that much there. But the previous season, he had like 40 pressures or something. And the 2 seasons prior to that with Jacksonville, he had over 35 pressures. So this is somebody who was generating pressure on a defense that didn't really have a ton of leads. Like, Jacksonville's not a great team.
Right.
So I am interested in both Ledbetter and Roy Robertson Harris and just how Shane Bowen is going to divvy up these snaps. And if we can get anything from Jordan Riley or DJ Davidson, or are they just going to be lost on the third team?
I've been mostly moved on those two, but I would agree it's something to consider. They're developing, they're younger players. Maybe we can get a late breakout from, it wouldn't even be that late, just a random breakout, I would call it, from either of those two players. skeptical of it personally. I never
Yeah.
really believed in them to begin with, but who knows? Maybe. But I will say this, that does put more onus on those two that you named, the veterans and Alexander, to really play a big role. Depth is still lacking on the interior defensive line.
And then there's the Chapman question too, because he had his role last year, and I think he had like 19 pressures. It's pretty respectable, right? UDFA.
Not bad.
Not bad. But if Darius Alexander hits the ground running, do the Giants find Chapman to be a little bit more expendable, since he's not a player you're going to put out there? You're only really putting him out there during sub packages, because he's like 5'11". He's like, he's a short guy.
I would hope not, though, because I still think he has more upside personally on the roster than any of the Riley and those guys, Davidsons of the world.
I would agree with that, but those guys can execute different roles that might be more valuable, goal line and things like that. Whereas Chapman's a little bit more of a niche player, but I do like Elijah Chapman better than some of these other defensive linemen we have as well.
For sure.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Look, we all love to work out. The summer's coming around. You want to look good in your bathing suit, but in order to enhance your workout, you want to go and use MitoPure from Timeline. This is a great product. When I started using it, it makes me feel stronger, gives me more energy. I recover quicker. I'm in my 30s. I still have the energy to work out. And if you want that energy, you really should give Timeline's MitoPure a shot and work it into your routine. The great year of 2025 is your year to be the best, most energized, most revitalized you. MitoPure promotes cellular renewal and mitochondrial health to address common signs of aging at the root. MitoPure is the research-backed innovation that unlocks your fullest potential. Timeline is offering 10% off your order of MitoPure right now. So go to timeline.com/banter. It's timeline.com/banter. That's TIMELINE.
Let's skip. We don't have to do this in order of the defense. I want to talk secondary next. It's more fun than the linebackers. Linebackers feel like there's the least interest.
Yeah.
There's just the same group coming back. But from the secondary standpoint, there's just a lot of interesting storylines, prospects, and players to discuss. We have two new safeties coming in. We have one new safety coming in and another safety coming back for year 2 that we're really excited about. At corner, we have a new corner coming in. So 2 new players to the secondary that are likely to start. At corner, we also have a player who was a rookie last year who had a phenomenal season in Drew Phillips, who could have that really fun second-year camp breakout where we're like, all right, all signs are pointing. The drum beat's building. It's steady. This guy's going to break out as a nickel guy for us, and we're going to have one of the 10 best nickels. And then we have the last thing to discuss, which is probably the most interesting for camp, who's going to win that cornerback 2 job, because the Giants have made it clear during the spring it's an open competition between Deontay Banks and Cordell Flott. What's most intriguing to you of all those things?
Most intriguing to me, I think it's Deontay Banks, man, just because he's a first-round pick the Giants traded up for, and I know there's a ton of talent there. Can he just get back to the upward trajectory that we thought he was on prior to the 2024 season? Because as we always say, development, it's not linear, and his development just freaking went down, absolute decline last year from many different aspects, right? We're talking about mental decline, the product on the field. I think he surrendered almost like 10 percentage points more of a completion percentage last year than his previous season. Like it was rough, but again, like it's not like he's getting burnt in coverage all that much. I still think there's a very good football player in Deontay Banks. I just want to see that. I want him to be salvaged. I don't want him to become another Evan Neal. We don't need any more burnt first round picks. I think Deontay Banks is talented, so I'm really going to be paying attention to him. And I know that that Javon Holland and Paulson, I'm very excited to see how they work out as well. I think I think you brought it up. There's a lot of quality questions when it comes to the secondary, and I'm not sold on the secondary either. Especially if there's an injury that suffers, because the depth is another concerning part of the secondary, and that's the depth behind Dane Belton. Like Dane Belton's a valuable player. But Dane Belton, I don't really want him starting, though, in like base defensive person. I want him to be a sub-package linebacker, basically.
Right.
Just have him just use his eyes as a point guard to just read routes and just undercut them and hopefully come away with some PBUs and some turnovers. But safeties behind the starters, I don't really trust. And then the corners, like who do you trust behind Paulson Adebo? And we don't even trust Deontay Banks. Who do you trust behind Drew Phillips and Paulson Adebo? Cordell Flott, we're hoping that he can rekindle whatever little bit of magic that we saw towards the end of last season. I think I'm being pretty generous by saying that even, right?
Fair.
So And then you're looking at Trey Hawkins at third and Corey Black, who was a 7th-round pick. There's just a lot of names there that don't have a lot of cachet, that don't have a lot of production, don't have a lot of experience. So I'm a little nervous about that. And I could see that part of the roster might get turned over when final cuts happen as well. But hey, training camp's along, and any of these guys can rise to the occasion. Maybe Raheem Lane or Art Green or Nick Jones or TJ Moore or D Williams, one of these guys start making a name for themselves, then they can maybe earn a roster spot, and it could be Trey Hawkins, the third 2.0.
Possibly. And that's something that we always see in camp, right? Like these corners have a chance to stand out in that scenario, in that environment, but it's a lot harder in the regular season when you're going up against like Devontae Smith and AJ Brown, and Devontae Smith has a one-on-one. You're just, we've seen in the past with Trey Hawkins against the Dolphins where like, it's like third down, good luck playing press man with no safety help against Tyreek Hill, Trey Hawkins.
What was Wink Martindale thinking there? Because I remember we even, propounded the idea that was a blown coverage by Xavier McKinney. And I think McKinney, being Xavier McKinney, came out afterwards and was like, no, it wasn't. That was the call. Like, I think he addressed it on Twitter because Xavier McKinney can't keep his mouth shut, right? And I'm just like, I love that, man. Just put it out there. So I was like, wait, so you're telling me that Trey Hawkins, the third, went out there? And I want to say I heard a story, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, that somebody like lost their helmet or something like that. And Trey Hawkins III got thrown out there as the play was going on. And it was like, this is the coverage, and it wasn't supposed to be Trey. And it just so happened that it wasn't necessarily a really poor decision by Wink Martindale, but it was like something that happened that was uncontrollable, that somebody had to get thrust into a lineup to guard Tyreek Hill one-on-one. Still, I'm not sure.
It was one of the biggest blowouts I think we've watched in a while for the Giants. And no, we did see the 40-0 Cowboys game.
The 40-0 Cowboys game will go down. Like everybody thought, oh, the Giants, we're doing great. And dude, we just got freaking
because
rocked.
of that, it will go down as bigger blow. But I felt like we were getting blown out even more against the Dolphins. The Dolphins are just like ripping, only because the Dolphins are just like ripping off these like 50+ chunk plays. And that's so rarely feel like you watch games where that happens. Like Achane for 70, Tyreek for 50.
If I remember correctly, that was the game where
Bobby
hurt. Well, yes, but Bobby Okereke came away with it. Like I think we had like 2 red zone turnovers,
interceptions, still lost by 40,
and we still lost. But yeah, exactly. Like, there were 2 turnovers that the Giants defense forced in the red zone against the Miami Dolphins, and we still just got obliterated. We couldn't do anything with that. Yeah,
couldn't do anything with that. And we gave up so many explosive plays. But yeah, corner's just such a wild position, man. I want to believe that there is still a talented, I know there's still a talented player in Deonte Banks, but like, I don't know where his confidence is at. And I know how hard it is to get good to round it to form at that position. And while I did like his tape at Maryland, you're still watching a corner play. It wasn't Patrick Surtain's tape at Bama. It wasn't that type of player. And it's just like, I always kind of feel like if I'm betting on corner, I want to get, and that level, you're not going to find that in a lot of classes, but like if I'm using high capital at position these days, I want that, or I'll just sign someone like a Dabo.
I know you're on that train.
I'm on that train.
I look like Devon Witherspoon, and I look at Deonte Banks, for instance. Like those guys are first.
Been good though.
I think so, but those guys are. I haven't paid attention to Seattle too much, but I know he had a lot of momentum in his rookie season. Okay. Those guys are first-round players to me, based off their tape. It's just like there's so much to playing the corner position,
right?
And there's a lot of mental and so you really kind of got to know the person that you're bringing into your locker room and see how coachable they are and how adaptable they are and how thick their skin is. And a lot of those questions can really hinder a lot of those realities can really hinder the development of a player if it's not going that well. And it hasn't gone that well at all for the New York Giants in a while. But
there also, just one final thing on that. There is like a smaller margin of error, I think, for a corner like a Surtain or a Banks, because both those corners to me were always drafted based on their ability to be sticky and cut. The upside to them was they were going to be sticky in coverage. Neither of them were great ball playmakers at college. Surtain obviously better than Banks, but he wasn't like this, Asante Samuel type 8 interception guy. And Surtain may be a little better than Banks in this, but neither of them were like big run game helps and not guys that can really help you in the run game. So you're really drafting them for one of 3 ways to play the corner. It's just, and it's the most important way by far. When it hits with Surtain, look how good it is. But like for Banks going into this year, it's like we don't expect him to be this great run defending corner no matter what at this point, right, Nick? We're just kind of hopeful that he's like going to throw his body out there and be more aggressive.
No, I don't think he's like a lot. Like, so do you remember what was his name? CJ Henderson, the kid out of Florida that went to Jacksonville, and he was a real liability.
Well,
like there's guys like that. Like Deonte Banks isn't that.
He's not a plus there.
I wouldn't say he's a plus, but I don't really know if he's a minus either. I think he's
Right.
just like,
No, I'm saying
yeah.
that. I'm saying he's not a plus there, and I don't think he's a plus ball maker. To there, he could even be considered a minus on ball skills.
I think he's very bad at the catch point.
Yeah.
I think he's very bad.
He's a minus there, and he's about average at best at the other thing. So he really, his only path is to get really good at coverage, and that's just we'll see what happens.
I don't really think he's like I don't look at his run defense like, oh geez, he's out there. I think he's like an even run defender with some upside that he could be better if he's in a better mindset. Again, I don't think he's like a CJ Henderson or like an Ahkello Witherspoon or a lot of these guys who just like are afraid of contact. And I know I say that, and I know it's like strange because he blew that play out of his ass against Jalen Hurts last year, right? And that kind of seems like contradictory, but I think a lot of that was him just giving up mentally.
Right.
And if he's dialed in, if the team is playing well, and I hate to have a player like that on my roster, like, don't get me wrong. Like I do, I want everybody to be mentally strong, but these are freaking like 22, 23-year-old kids, like they're men, don't get me wrong, but they're
different
young.
World these days. Yeah.
It's a different world these days. Exactly.
Yeah.
I just think that's a reality that is unfortunate, but it's one that, that you have to address. I don't think he's a liability as a run defender. And
I want to make clear, I don't think he's a liability. I just don't see the upside of him being a great or a good run defender. I think average is about fair for him there.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Now with Drew Phillips, Phillips.
That's the one where he can make us. If he takes a step back in coverage, he's still so good around the line of scrimmage.
He's so good around the line of scrimmage, man. He's such an asset in nickel sub packages and everything. So great. But if something were to happen to Drew Phillips, who is playing nickel for us? Is it Cordell Flott? And if something were to happen to and I know I'm like, if something were to happen, like a lot of injuries do happen. Like I feel like Cordell Flott's in this weird spot where Cordell Flott is the backup corner and the backup nickel, and I'm not confident in either.
I'm not confident in either. I actually originally thought he'd be a better nickel than outside corner, but I don't think that anymore. No. I don't like. It's not that I don't think. It's like if you went from Drew Phillips to Cordell Flott as your nickel, you're just changing so much of your to me at least, because like he's not a physical nickel. You're going from a super physical nickel to a not a long, lengthy, not physical nickel, and I don't know if that even works.
I don't know either. That's why I'm concerned with the secondary. I like the starters.
We need to back up nickel somewhere. We need to find somebody.
I know. Well, maybe one of these guys the Giants brought in, but like I don't really know enough about them to make that assertion at all. Now I want to, before we address linebacker, one more thing: depth at edge. Look, I think the Giants have one of the best foursomes at edge, right? If you put Golston in there, Golston's probably going to play a little defensive line, but Burns, Thibodeau, Abdul Carter, and Golston, that's very, very just effective, and it makes me smile.
Yeah.
But Victor Dimukeji, I like that addition, but now he's out with that pec injury.
Yeah.
So who the hell do we have behind all these guys? Trace Ford and Tumon Fox?
Well, surprisingly, and I don't want to go all off this, but Fox was mentioned on that Schmelk podcast. They like at least the players like Fox.
I love that. I don't hate Tumon Fox. Don't get me wrong. It's just he's been here for a while, and it's one of those guys. He's like, 45's out there. Let's see what he can do. And I think he brings a certain energy about him, and he does have explosiveness, but we're
not at a point yet roster wise where like any depth is going to be.
I know four guys like deep is enough, but like,
sure.
But I just, there's like really kind of nothing behind them since Dimukeji ended up getting injured.
Speaking of position, I mean, we're going to have to stay healthy in general if we're going to have a good season, because we have, again, like no depth across the board besides quarterback. That's like the one position we can now afford injuries at, in my mind, at least, because I wouldn't mind seeing Jameis or Dart out there personally. And running back too. We have some depth there. Because actually, if you look at it, and I wanted to throw this in, it's better for
offensive line, we have a little bit of depth too.
And offensive line. The offense weirdly has depth, just not a lot of high-end starting potential right now. Just a lot of depth. Versus the defense, which is the opposite. It's got really high-end starting potential and no depth. So it's just an interesting roster construction based on that. But speaking of the linebackers, I don't really expect too much change at that position. Like, can Muasau take a step forward? Maybe. I don't know. We'll see on that front. He was a late round pick, not the biggest dude, not the most athletic dude, but the two. Yeah, go ahead.
I think I would be more intrigued by Deontay Johnson than Darius Muasau.
Sure.
Now, just off of like, what we saw in training camp last year and how he had a lot of positive momentum, and he's like a 6'2", 230-pound linebacker who can like run and actually like carry the three vertically and has fluid hips. And a lot of people were talking about him at training camp last year, and then he got injured against the Lions after he had like 3 pressures in that game. I think he sacked Jared Goff. Yeah, he was very good. He got injured in that game, and then he returned in like week like 17, and he played like 30 snaps against the Eagles in week 18. So like, I'm intrigued to see if he can earn any snaps. This is Micah McFadden's contract year. And then Bobby Okereke, I think he'll just be the solidified starter. But I'm also interested to see if Abdul Carter just eats into their snaps by playing linebacker as well.
Interesting, yeah.
It really depends on how it depends on how they value Micah McFadden. Because I wouldn't be shocked if the Giants extended Micah McFadden either. I think they like Micah McFadden, but like it really just kind of, it all comes down to that. Like, what is their opinion of Micah McFadden? Is he a part of this team long term? Because I don't think he would cost all that much money. I'm not saying the Giants should sign him, but they have a much better idea in the building. And if they don't love him, then I think that could open up an avenue for Darius Muasau and Deontay Johnson.
It could. It could also, I think the more intriguing one for me, at least, is the first one you brought up, the first scenario, which is this defense is definitely going to be better in my mind if the personnel back, just from a personnel standpoint. Now, I don't know if this makes defense better. I'll explain why in a second. But from a personnel standpoint, this defense is going to be better with Thibodeau and Carter on the field versus Carter and McFadden, or versus Thibodeau and McFadden. That's no offense to McFadden. It's just the obvious nature. But at the same time, if you have that first example of Carter and Thibodeau on the field, Thibodeau can't play the role that Carter can play off ball, probably. So that means you're taking Carter away from the edge and that wide 9 position that Bowen likes to run. And that's in itself potentially disadvantageous to your defense, because Carter rushing that arc is almost unguardable by some of these tackles.
Absolutely. A lot of this comes down to Shane Bowen's usage of the personnel and what plays he calls. Because this is like having a guy like Abdul Carter, you can run so many fun simulated pressures. Yeah. So like there's times where he's going to be on the edge and he'll drop off, but like the protection might shift to his side because he already has 2 sacks in that game, and that's going to lead to a one-on-one for Brian Burns. And then you can send Drew Phillips from the opposite. Like, you can get so creative and just win that chess match against the opposing offensive coordinator, the opposing offensive line coach. Abdul Carter's presence allows you to do that. So that's another thing I'm excited to see. How is Shane Bowen employing all of this, including the secondary, with blitzing, with simulated pressures in training camp? How much of that is going to show us dumb media folk once we get our boots up?
Yeah, and I'm sure they won't want to show everything in camp, but it'll be interesting to see in the regular season for sure. And one thing that I think about is all those years we've watched the Giants offensive line fail to pick up stunts and have just these communication issues. That's going to start happening to opposing defenses, because when you pepper before the snap Abdul Carter over the A gap or the B gap, and these centers are watching this, there's going to be a lot of snap, and then he drops or something. There's going to be a lot of snaps where they're allocating a lot of bodies to Carter because he's Carter, and then they're late to get to whatever other pass rushers are making a move and rush for it.
Dexter Lawrence. They're going to be looking to get 4 hands on Dexter Lawrence on every play. You have Brian Burns, you have Abdul Carter, you have Kayvon Thibodeau. Like,
unbelievable.
They have, on paper, they have so much talent, but can they put it all together? And is Shane Bowen the guy to organize and orchestrate this just massively talented group of men that the New York Giants have on their defensive front?
I'm so excited to see week 1 against Jaden Daniels, because like I personally, I won't get into it yet too much, but I've said it like months ago and I still believe it. I think the Giants are going to upset the Commanders in week 1. I just have this gut feeling that I've had all offseason about this game from both sides. I think the Commanders are going in too high and too much, and then I don't think the roster is that perfect. And I think the Giants are going with no expectations, nothing to lose. And I mostly think that if it happens, it's because that our D-line just overwhelms their entire offensive front all game. And it's really going to be exciting to watch, and it won't be pretty. We're not going to win by 1,000,000 points, but I think a late, long touchdown to Neighbors is all it's going to take, really. And we'll see what happens on that front, but it's just exciting to me. The possibility.
Prognosticator right here.
That's how I feel. I felt that way since the schedule came out, and I won't come off of that. And I was hoping it was going to be Commanders week 1 of all the teams were. I was hoping it was going to be on the road. I wanted to be us on the road. They have higher expectations at home, and it gets tighter when you start to, when maybe the Giants are pulling this upset. They shouldn't have won. They're 9.5-point underdogs, that type of thing.
And this Terry McLaurin situation too. He's a little unhappy with the organization. That could affect it too.
They're so stupid. They have so much cap space with Daniels under a rookie contract. They need to just pay McLaurin. It sucks these days. You have to pay receivers insane amounts. Like Garrett Wilson just got to, and there's like no like nuance to contracts anymore. It's just like, if you're up for a contract, you just get the highest contract. It should be nuance to it. Like, it should be like, oh, Garrett Wilson is kind of like a 10th or 15th best receiver. He'll get a contract in that range. McLaurin's a little bit lower. He'll get a No, it's just like, if you're up for a deal, you just are now the highest paid player. It's dumb.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think that's just a pro player approach, right?
True. Yeah, that is a pro player.
Pro player, and I'm always, and I know you are too, pro player over pro owner.
That's fair. All right, that's fair. I agree with that. I'm definitely pro player over pro owner. So I'm with that one. All right. That's all we got for the Big Blue Banner podcast today. We talked some defense. We talked some stuff we're looking forward to. Please hit the like button. Please comment. You guys are always great in the comments and keep the conversation going there, which helps us boost the algorithm. We had fun doing that review of the Giants playoff game. YouTube didn't, or YT, I don't want to even say the name, didn't love it as much as we did. I think that when you do a show, Nick, where you're recording over a video that was already on YouTube, maybe they kind of knock it a little bit. I don't know. It's just my thoughts.
It's our least, oh my God, it's our least watched live stream that we've ever done, which is crazy because
the opposite of that is, and that is not just true because it was July, Nick. I think it's because after usually we would rack up another like few thousand of people post watch.
Well, we got demonetized right away too.
Right. And I see in the comments people are liking it, but so it just may not be worth, unfortunately we enjoyed it a lot, but it just may not be worth the squeeze. And I know a lot of people are like, keep doing these were so much fun. We might try to think of another way to do it that won't demonetize us, but like if it's going to get demonetized and YouTube and it's going to be pushed down the algorithm, it's not fair to us, I don't think, unfortunately. So just a heads up on why you may not see some of those again, but please, thank you for liking the video, commenting. We do appreciate your support. It's about to get really good here too at Big Blue Banter, not to toot our own horn, but we're going to have training camp coverage. Nick is going to be at camp and I'm going to do my best to get the best questions to him from what he's seen at camp to get the best answers out of him that you guys will all get to receive. And then we move on to our best stuff, our film reviews. And hopefully if it's winning football, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch the tape. So keep it locked and loaded. Have a great rest of your week or weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.